we had a real hot day one day, and I just began to think about some of our homeless community that I knew a particular area where they stay a lot of times, where we pick them up on the bus and bring them to church. And I thought, well, I'm going to get some waters, and I'm going to go over and just visit everybody. And I do that from time to time. When a lot of times when I get really stressed, and I really start to sort of lose focus. One of my favorite things is just to go over there and see some of my friends over there and just check on them. And it's just, it's just something that I just like to do. And no one necessarily knows that I do it until now. Anyhow, that day I went over, I felt led to take some water over there, some cold water, because it was really hot. And I get over there and I'm handing out waters. I get all my waters handed out, and I'm just kind of visiting with some folks. And there was a little lady who'd just gotten saved 3 weeks prior. And her name, her
name's Frances. We're going to give her honor.
I'll give her name. Her name's Frances. She's a little older lady, probably weighs 100 pounds, soaking wet. And she had got baptized actually 3 days prior to this story. And I seen Frances over there, and I spoke to her and told her how proud I was of her getting baptized and all that. But I walk on down the road a little bit, and I look, and I see a gentleman. I see a guy laying in the ditch. And he's laying there in the ditch, and I walked up to him, and he was in a pair of cut-off shorts with, I know it's horrible and it's nasty, but he had went to the bathroom all over himself, and he had it all over him, and there was a stench. Now I'm around some stuff, and I mean I hunt, I got deer, I do all the stuff, but I mean, it was just a horrible, horrible stench in the air that I could just barely really get. I had to stay upwind, and I asked the gentleman. I said, "Hey," I said, "I don't believe I've ever seen you out here before." I said, told him my name, and I said, "Man, what's going on?" He started crying, and he said, "Nobody will help me." And he said, "I just had double knee replacement." And he said, "I don't have anywhere to go." And he said, "This is where I ended up." And of course, I could see the scars on his knees, and
they had locked up.
And they had locked up his knees, locked up with his knees bent, and so he's laying there and he's crying, and I said, "Man," I said, "Man, you're in bad shape." I said, "Man, I said, I'm gonna try to help you, but just give me a minute here. Give me a minute." So I'm kind of looking around and trying to figure out what I'm gonna do to help this guy. And right across the street, there was a church that was having a fundraiser that day, that evening, just so happens, and people were pulling in, and I mean literally right across the street, and they were at a place that was that you can hold parties and functions. And they were there pulling up in their nice cars, BMWs and Cadillacs, and people were getting out dressed to the nines. And they were, and I went over and spoke to one of them. I seen someone I knew over there, and I said, "What are y'all doing?" They said, "Well, we're having a big fundraiser today, raise money for this church project that we're doing." And people started coming in and out of the building, and they were coming in and out, and they were looking at a lot of the homeless community and saying things, sort of snide remarks and poking fun, and it just broke my heart. It just absolutely broke my heart, and I still didn't know what to do with the gentleman, and so I went to my truck and I sat down in my truck, and I just began to cry.
Yeah.
Forgive me.
You take your time.
And I just said, "Lord," I said, "need your help here." I said, this isn't fair. I said, you got to do something. And I just felt like he spoke to me. He just said, no, you got to do something. He said, you got to do something. That's the reason you're over here.
Wow.
So I got back out of the truck and went back over to the gentleman, and I said, man, I'm going to get you up. And he said, you don't want to touch me. He said, I've got crap all over me. And I said, I know, but I said, I'm going to get you up. I'm going to help you. And so about that time, little Frances comes walking back down the street, and she says, Pastor, can I help you? Can I help you do something? I said, Frances, I said, yeah, you can. I said, I'm going to try to get this guy up, and I'm going to put him in the back of my truck. Well, there's a guy who hangs out over in that area a lot, and he stays drunk about all the time. And I seen him over there about 150 yards away, and I have a good rapport with him. Me and him just we just click. And I walked over to him and I said, I need you to do me a huge favor. I said, nobody will help this guy. And I said, I need you to help me lift him and put him in the back of my truck with me. He said, okay. So he comes over and we get the guy up, and the guy's screaming in pain. He's hurting bad. And we get him and laid him in the back of my truck. And I said, man, I'm not sure what to do with you. I said, I don't know where to take you to get you cleaned up. I said, and it clicked on me. There was a car wash right down the road.
Only Kevin would think of a car wash.
That's why God calls rednecks sometimes.
That's right,
you
redneck.
know?
That's right.
God knows
That's right.
we are useful. Okay,
That's
we are
it.
useful.
So I remember the car wash being right around the corner, and I said, Miss Frances, I said, won't you get in the truck with me? And I said, we're going to take him around here to the car wash, and we're going to clean him up. And she said, okay, Pastor, let's do it. So we did. We put him in the car, put him in the back of the truck, drove right over there to the car wash, and got out. I let my tailgate down, and I told him, I said, man, I'm not going to hurt you. I know the high pressure washer would really hurt you. I said, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm just going to spray you lightly.
Yeah.
I'm going to use the brush, the scrubber brush that you use. I said, I'm going to use that on you. And I said, we're going to get you cleaned up.
So
little Frances, she gets back there, and she starts helping him, and she starts just being real nice to him.
like a mama.
So precious.
And
like a mama.
And I just got the scrubber out, and I started just scrubbing him with the scrubber. She pulled his clothes off. She said, now listen, I'm not being trying to see you naked. I don't care. I've got, I'm
not a weirdo.
I'm not a weirdo. I'm not, we're cleaning you up. And she stripped him down.
That's awesome.
And I just took the scrubber and scrubbed him, and I just told him, I said, man, we're going to help you. We're going to get you cleaned up. And so we scrubbed him down, got him cleaned up, and took the water after that and rinsed him off really good. Got him rinsed. Of course, didn't do the high pressure, just let it drip and cleaned him up and got him cleaned up. And he cried and he cried and he cried and he thanked us and he thanked us and he thanked us. It was just such a beautiful thing. And I called a lady from church who I knew always had extra clothes for men and women, and it just so happened she was just right down the road.
Wow.
And she shows up before we're even completely done with clothes, and while she's there, she says, someone said this pawn shop over here the other day had a wheelchair. Let's go over and get him a wheelchair. So we got to get him a wheelchair. The guy was just so thankful.
Wow.
Frances, she said, I'll take care of him. I'll help him until we get him in somewhere off the street. And which she did. She did all that. And it was just an amazing story. It was just an amazing, just so humbling, such a humbling experience. And we got him taken care of, got him all cleaned up, got him a place to go, all that stuff. And I went back down on the street and I started talking to some of the other folks that I know. And, I said, I seen a lady, Carolyn, I know really well. And I said, Carol, I said, I want to ask you this without you getting mad at me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, don't get mad at me. I said, but how long has it been since you've had a shower?
Mm-hmm.
She said, do I stink? And I said, no, I'm not asking for that reason. Yeah. Just go with it. How long has it been since you've had a shower? And she said, well, it's been about 10 days since I've had one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just started asking different ones. I said, hey, how long has it been since you've had a shower? Well, it's been 3 or 4 days. Well, it's been 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. Well, a guy comes up to me and says, Pastor, we've got pride.
Mm-hmm.
We know we stink.
Mm.
And you guys come over here a lot and ask us to come to church.
Mm.
Well, we know we stink. And one of the reasons we don't come is because we know we stink. And we don't want to come in there stinking and feeling, humiliated because we stink.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, well, that's what I was wondering. So I left, and on the way home, I just started thinking about it. And I just felt like the Lord was saying, you need to buy a shower. You need to buy some showers. You need to buy a portable shower trailer so these folks can have a shower. So I'm like, Lord, all right, I'll do this. I'll check this out. So I begin to check, and I begin to look, and these showers are really, really high. They're, we're talking, they're between $40,000 and $50,000. And so I just began to pray. I said, well, Lord, if this is what you want, you're going to have to show up big. We got a lot going on. We got other things going on, but God, we're going to do this. So Sunday, I don't remember the scripture I preached out of, but the Lord really laid it on my heart strong to talk about ministry and talk about pouring into others and helping others. So I told the story, and I talked about the shower, and I said, right now I want to give you guys an opportunity to give toward this at the end of the service. And people brought down, there was either $43,000 or $44,000.
Are you serious?
Laid upon the altar that morning.
That morning in one service.
In one service.
Oh my goodness.
There was one guy that had just